Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. Patch 9.2 is right around the corner, and this is the patch where Season 9 Ranked officially begins. And with that, there are a lot of new changes to cover, so if you end up enjoying the video, then don't forget to hit that like button. And as usual, this video will be made in collaboration with Pro Guides. It's a website that helps you improve your overall League of Legends gameplay and knowledge, and with Season 9 again just around the corner, this might be the perfect time to check them out. The link is down below. So the first and one of the biggest changes coming out this patch is the release of the newest champion, Sylas. Now Sylas is going to be a champion that'll be played mid lane, top lane, and probably in the jungle as well. He is kind of a hybrid of a bruiser and an AP carry assassin. He does build full AP, and overall the champion is fairly easy to start playing, but also has a very complex kit that can definitely separate good players and bad players. He feels somewhat lane punishing. His ultimate can steal literally any ultimate in the game. His W heals a disgusting amount of HP if you're below 40%, so watch out for that. And his E ability is something similar to Echo's E ability, but it has a mini CC, which if you didn't know, if you steal Yasuo's ultimate, you can actually ult off of your own E. All in all, the champion is honestly fantastic. I absolutely love him. He's so much fun to play. He is honestly a little bit on the powerful side in my opinion, but Sylas, along with Season 9 Ranked beginning, is coming out in just a few days. But speaking of Sylas, now this is not 100% yet, but there are nerfs on the PBE server, and the nerfs are towards his W, where the heal AP ratio has actually been lowered by 5%. Like I said, it is very powerful, and the base amount of healing has also been lowered just flat out across the board. This is not surprising at all because the healing on his W is quite ridiculous, and I feel like even with this it'll still be very good, but at least it won't be as disgusting. On top of this, his ultimate also received a buff, where the total AD to AP ratio has been increased from 0.4 to 0.7, and this in my opinion is actually a quite decent buff. Now if you don't know, the way his ultimate works is if you hijack an ultimate, like let's say Nocturne's ultimate that scales only off of AD, it auto converts it to AP based on a ratio you can see at the very bottom of the skill's description. So this is actually a decent buff towards his ultimate and will make those kind of ultimates do a lot more damage. Another massive change coming to start Season 9 Ranked is position ranks. Now I've made other videos talking about it, but I'll briefly touch on it here. This is only coming out initially for NA and Korea servers. And essentially what this means now is every single position will have its own respective rank, and whenever you win in that position, you'll get LP for that specific rank and a little bit of LP for your other ranks as well. So you could be queued in as maybe a Diamond 1 mid laner to a certain game, but maybe like a Diamond 5 AD carry, and based on whichever role you get in Champ Select, you'll be in that MMR of games, which I think is going to be very interesting to see how it works. But moving along, we have some nerfs coming over to Aatrox very quickly, starting off with his Q ability, where the first swing AD ratio has been lowered, and his Umbral Dash, the E ability, the recharge time has also been increased. Aatrox has very consistently been a very powerful champion top lane and in the mid lane, and even in the jungle if you really want to play him there, so some nerfs for him is not surprising, and hopefully it'll put him a little bit back in line. Moving along, we have a quick buff coming over to Aurelion Sol that'll make his Q ability just a lot more easier and more fluid to use, and also be more effective against melee champions. Because now you can reactivate the Q ability to stun much closer to you, which again is good against melee champions, and it also has a new effect where the longer and farther away the Q travels, the longer it will actually stun for. Next up, we have a nerf coming over to Brand's passive, where the dot damage has been lowered from 4% max HP down to 3% max HP over 4 seconds. Now, this isn't the biggest nerf in the world, but his passive is easily abusable, and it's a very strong passive when you combine it with Liandry's and Rally's, so any nerfs to this whatsoever I think is perfectly welcomed, and even with this, Brand should still be perfectly fine. Next up on the chopping block, we have Cassiopeia, and it's going to be a nerf coming over to her W, easily one of the more obnoxious abilities in League of Legends as a whole. The cooldown on this ability is being increased, and the damage per second is being lowered. Personally, I would have been much happier if I saw maybe a reduction in the amount it slows, maybe down to 30% instead of, I don't know, maybe the damage going down, because I feel like the damage on the W isn't the biggest issue, it's the CC and what it offers instead. But either way, it is a nerf in the right place because Cassiopeia's W is insanely powerful. But speaking of insanely powerful champions, the next one is going to be Galio, another champion in the mid lane that is probably one of the most powerful at the very moment. The nerf is going to be towards his Q ability, which is the right area to nerf for sure. The gust damage has been lowered, the mana cost has been increased, and apparently his AP ratio on the tornado has also been lowered to now only giving you 0.66% per 100 AP rather than a full 1.33%. Overall, some solid nerfs coming over to the right parts of Galio, which is of course his Q. Moving along, however, we have somewhat of a big change coming over to Irelia. Some would even call it a mini rework. So starting off with her passive, no longer does she deal bonus damage to shields at max stacks. Her Q ability's minion damage has also been changed now from dealing double damage to minions to now dealing its own flat base bonus damage to minions. And probably her biggest changes towards her ultimate Vanguard's Edge, where the wall damage has actually been increased quite significantly, 100 extra damage at rank 3. The slow potency has been increased by 30%, now sitting at 90%, but the wall duration has been lowered to 2.5 seconds at all ranks, and no longer does it disarm. So essentially, you're trading off the disarm effect for extra slow and extra damage. Now, the question is that worth it? Personally, I think that's actually not too bad of a trade-off. Obviously, the disarm effect, especially when going after like an AD carry, is fantastic. But the slow makes it just completely easy to land your E ability on the targets, and the damage increase, even though it's only 100 at rank 3, again by rank 3, keep in mind everyone is around level 16, so 100 HP at that point in the game isn't anything completely absurd, but at the end of the day it probably is an overall nerf for the champion. Next up on the change list, we have some quick changes coming over to Jarvan towards his E ability, where the passive attack speed has just overall been increased, period, by 5%. Not the biggest change in the world, however, this will slightly help his jungle clear, and especially once you get very late into the game, let's say you're doing a Baron or even just team fighting, that 5% extra attack speed, since attack speed is a percent multiplicative stat, especially on your AD carry at that stage of the game, is going to be a lot more beneficial than it may sound initially. Next up, very quickly, we have some changes coming over to Jax, where his base AD is being lowered and also the leap strike damage is also being lowered. Not the biggest changes in the numbers overall and how much damage he'll still do, and I don't even think they're hitting the right places of Jax if they were to hit Jax at all, but I mean, it's here and I mean, I guess there it is. But then we also have a nerf coming over to Kassadin, where his base armor and armor per level are both being lowered, and the base armor is being lowered by about 4, which is a decent amount. Now this will definitely affect his laning phase. Of course, Kassadin is not supposed to have a good laning phase, even though he actually surprisingly does in my opinion, and against some champions like Zed, this will be even harder for him to sustain now against the champion, and I feel like that's the way it should be. So overall, a good change. Now we have a slightly bigger change coming over to Kayn. Now a lot of it is kind of quality of life-ish changes. It's nothing completely specific to just numbers or buffs in terms of damage. But there's a really big list of the changes, but the TLDR of this is the fact that now his passive will work better and be a lot more obvious as to which form you'll be getting. You can ping to your teammates how close you are to each form and stuff like that. And it'll just be easy to understand who you should be finishing off your final attacks to actually get the form that you want. Another quick change is the fact that you can now actually start recalling before your E ability is finished its full animation, even if you already came out of the wall, which is definitely a nice change, and his ultimate will now have an actual positioning distance thing that you can choose when you come out of the target, so you won't always be forced to come out a fixed distance. If you want, you can come out essentially right beside the targets. But on the flip side, if you're playing blue Kayn, you actually have not only a longer distance, but you can also choose to come out a farther distance away from your target for other reasons, like maybe going after another target beside the one that you ultied. But moving along to other changes, we have NiKo coming up next. Now NiKo is going to have a W change to where now the clone duration has actually been increased, and the bonus movement speed has also been increased, the duration of it. However, on the other side of the table, we have her ultimate, where no longer will this ability now slow enemy champions when NiKo leaps up into the air. The leap duration, however, is slightly shorter to make up for the fact that she no longer slows, which I think overall is a nerf for the champion for sure. Next, some very quick changes coming over to Ornn. His base HP has been increased and his base armor have both been increased just to make his laning phase a little bit more impactful, because apparently it no longer is. Following this, some changes coming over to Rekon. So his base armor is actually being lowered to make his laning phase a little bit more vulnerable. But then you also have some changes to his W, where it just impacts the overall speed of it. So now the base speed is lower, but it scales off of your current tier of boots rather than 30% of your current movement speed. The delay on arrival before impact is also being lowered by just a tad. Now the idea behind this is that they want to nerf high, low, or pro Rekon players. So this means that there is functionally the same total delay on max range W casts, but Rekon spends more time traveling to the target position. Moving along, we have some changes coming over to Shyvana, where her passive Fear of the Dragonborn, the bonus physical and magical damage against dragons have actually been increased, and her E ability, Flame Breath, the basic attack damage on this ability has also been increased by just under 8%. Now these changes are going to make Shyvana a little bit more powerful, a little bit more easier to solo dragon and stuff with, and AP Shyvana is going to be even more powerful, so I'm a little bit concerned about this change, to be completely honest. Following this, some nerfs coming over to Erga, where the base armor is being lowered, the mana cost on his Q is going up, and the cooldown on his W is also going up. Just kind of hitting him across the board with not anything too crazy, not lowering his damage, but definitely lowering the overall utility and how often he can cast his spells. Moving on to Volibear's ability, no longer will it deal bonus damage to dashing or airborne targets. Instead, now it'll just deal 8% of the target's max HP. In other words, it'll be less impactful in the laning phase since the flat bonus damage is being removed and is being removed with percent HP instead. Moving along, we also have his ultimate Thunderclaws, where the delay before the initial bolt-on cast has been changed to be a little bit faster, and the AP ratio has also been increased by 10%, making Volibear, especially if you build him AP for whatever reason, pretty deadly. And the final change for champions is going to be towards a Yorick. So starting with this passive, it's receiving some decent buffs where Yorick's ghouls no longer deal reduced damage when they're away from Yorick, so this makes him a lot more powerful overall. The deaths required for a grave have been lowered, so that makes his laning phase more powerful for sure. And then you also have his ultimate, where the Maiden's health has been lowered at the earlier parts of the game, but scales much heavier off of Yorick's health, so later in the game, of course, she'll have a disgusting amount of HP. Maybe even going something like Gargoyle's Yorick to proc the Gargoyles and then activate Maiden could be a pretty popular strategy. Her bonus attack damage has also been changed to just be weaker at the earlier parts of the game as well, and Maiden can now also follow Yorick or just assist Yorick or do whatever you want her to do, just in a better, easier way, and she'll actually listen to your commands. And now moving on to some other changes coming as well, we have Morellonomicon, where it had its AP lowered by 10, but the combined cost being lowered by 100. And then Oblivion Orb getting its cost increased by 100, but the AP being lowered by 5. We also have some changes coming over to the jungle, where both of the smites have been nerfed. So Blue Smite, the damage has just flat out been lowered, but then Red Smite, the damage has been lowered per tick, the total damage has been lowered as well, the dot duration has been lowered by a second, and no longer will it grant vision for the marked duration. Now, as someone that's a laner, not a jungler, I'm very happy about this because Red Smite is pretty broken in my opinion. It becomes impossible to duel the champion that Red Smites you. You just take so much less damage when you Red Smite someone. It's pretty absurd. Now, even though that's being unchanged, at least the damage is being lowered because the damage is also very, very high, and at least the duration of overall the buff is being lowered as well. But on the flip side, if you're a jungler, this is probably a change that you're not very happy to see. And the final thing we'll talk about is going to be some changes to runes. So when it comes to the mini runes, the AP and the AD offer from those runes is being slightly lowered. However, the armor and the MR offered by these runes is actually being increased by a decent amount. Absolute Focus is having its bonus AD and bonus AP lowered, so this will just be a little bit worse of a rune because it's actually being lowered by a decent amount. You also have a mini reward coming over for Overheal, where it'll be a little bit less of a shield to build up when you're allies overheal you up to 300%, because now it only goes up to 100%, but it also works off of your own heals. So champions that self-heal, like maybe a Kali even, Mordekaiser, will be pretty impactful. Legend Bloodline is getting a little bit of a change to where now the lifesteal is being lowered from 0.8 to 0.6%, but they're doubling the amount of stacks that you can have. And some minor changes coming over to Cut Down to where at the end of the day, it still acts very similar. And last but definitely not least, we also have a quick change coming over to Summoner Ignite. The damage on this has been overall lowered, but the cooldown has also been lowered by 30 seconds. And of course, we have some beautiful new skins coming out as well, such as Coin Emperor Tahm Kench, Firecracker Sejuani, Vayne, and Heartbreaker Vi and Fiora. But there you guys have it, a bunch of changes coming out to start Season 9. So if you enjoyed the video, then definitely hit that like button. Let me know what you think about the changes below. Good luck in the new season, and hope to see you for the next video. Peace.